Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I would like us all to consider together what precisely is meant by this path to enlightenment. According to our Islamic Sufi tradition, every spiritual path has two dimensions. One we can call the metaphysical dimension or aspect, and the other the grounded or the pragmatic or the theological side accompanying the mystical vision. And what is meant by the mystical vision is that the perceiver, the individual, has an experience, a direct experience of what we call the oneness of all that is. It is a state of consciousness where the everyday duality that we tend to live through, seeing things as either good or bad, or night or day, or we see something as solid or spiritual, all those boundaries are relinquished, and the world around us is experienced in its unitive state as oneness. It's traditionally referred to as a mystical experience. Often it happens under hypotropic substances, LSD, other kinds of drugs, magic mushrooms. But what is underlying this dynamic is the fact that our everyday mind, which we apprehend the world as solid and as discrete, separate objects, you and I. The walls are solid. There's someone sitting there and I'm sitting here. These boundaries fall away, and we experience the world, the cosmos, as a cosmic oneness, almost an ocean without discernment, discrimination. And this experience of Tawheed in the Sufi and Islamic vocabulary, this experience of Tawheed has been reported by adherents of every spiritual tradition throughout history. When we, and even if the direct experience has not happened to someone, intellectually, through our cognitive faculties, we can understand the idea through the current discoveries in quantum physics and in science that the entire universe is a unified field, and there is no actual separation between the fabric of the universe, which includes all human creation, but it is sort of like a cosmic soup of oneness. And simply because we are separate points in space and embodied in our form, we tend to experience life in separation. And that duality between separation and gatheredness, between separateness and unity, is useful in our everyday life experience to function. But what we term as ultimate reality, or the ultimate dimension of what is real, the essence of this universal fabric, is actually inseparable and in oneness. So we have that mystical dimension, if you like, or the unitive state, as the underlying ground of all existence. And existence itself is experienced by us as separate, discrete objects in time and space. The mystical dimension has no experience, no awareness of time and space. You transcend in one's consciousness this everyday realm of duality and are in a place of consciousness that has no sentiency of time and of space itself. It's boundless. So we look at the one dimension which we call the metaphysical, and that being of unity, tawheed, or oneness, and the other dimension of duality in which we live our everyday existence. And it is in the second form, the second dimension, where what we call the rules of the religion, or the Sharia, if you like, the practices of how we carry out the worship of the One, is collected, codified, and established as a path of religion. So we have what we call the spiritual, the more spiritualized, mystical aspect, and we have the practical tools of our worship and religion. This distinction is probably the key to people understanding what enlightenment truly is. And I think it's clear, isn't it, to all of us, yes, people shaking their heads, of course, that we as human beings are the meeting place between these two dimensions. We have access to the spiritual, and we are spiritual in essence, and we live in the world of form, and we are embodied in form. So when the Quran refers to the people of Medina as being the best of creation, because they are ummatan wasatan, people of the middle way, that's who we are. We are the people of the middle way. We are that bridge between the seen and the unseen, between matter and spirit, and we encompass both. This is the cosmology of who we are as human beings. So if we ask, who am I? This is who we are. And by recognizing this, we accept what Islam teaches us, that we already have our illumined essence within us. We already are light. We already carry the light. And that spark of the divine spirit that is within each of us, we call that our soul. And that spark has always been and will always be a part of God. And this is why we refer to ourselves as children of God, and why we carry the divine light within me. And again, the Hadith Qudsi that says, heaven and earth cannot contain me, or I cannot be found in heaven and earth, but I can be found in the heart of the believer. So we are already light, we're already enlightened. And what veils us from our own illumination is what we might refer to as the self. Let's explain the self. What do we mean by self? When we are born into this world, the soul, again, this is our cosmology in Islam and Sufism, the soul is embodied within the human form, and an infant is born into this world after 9 months of ingestion. The moment that the faculties of sentiency, touch, taste, smell, sound, hearing, tasting, speech, become part of this living organism of the infant, what we call a self or personality begins to develop. And throughout our lifetime, this self or personality becomes conditioned primarily by the power couple that is our first caretaker, usually mother and father, or whoever looks after us, and the opinion and the influences and the impact of the world around us. What does society expect of us? What do our parents and our family want us to be in terms of our career choices? So as we go through our years, our authentic, illumined soul becomes, we say personified. We take on a kind of a personality that is highly conditioned by our culture, our society, by the wishes of other people, and the opinions of people that are influential in our lives. And we often begin to wonder, well, who am I? Who am I doing this for? It doesn't feel right, but it's expected of me. The expectations of the other primarily becomes who most of us are for most of our lives. And it is this conditioned mind, or the conditioned self, that actually is the veil to our own illumined soul, to our own enlightenment. Very early on in childhood, you see young children who have the pure spontaneity. And this is, we say, what lovely, soulful, pure beings they are, because it is closer to that spontaneity of the joy of life. What our journey in life is actually is the journey from the conditioned self or the ego self back to soul. That is the ultimate journey. And we do it by wandering into the ashrams of India and the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, looking after Sufi sheikhs, and our own private religious retreats, spiritual retreats, whatever journey we tend to take. The actual journey is simply moving out of that state of conditioning, back to connect, or back to surrender into our own soul, into the divine light within us, into the Godhead, the prophetic being of who we truly are. But somehow we have to do an outer travel to have that resonance with the inner journey. Let's revisit this idea of the self, the ego, and the conditioning. We often hear on the spiritual path that the ego is the enemy, or the lower self is what prevents us from being truly spiritual beings. The ego itself, there is nothing wrong with the ego. We are born to survive in this world, and the self, or the ego self, is our survival mechanism. So very early on, when we're helpless, very young, too vulnerable to make a change in our life, we do respond to other people and society's views on who we ought to be. Otherwise, we'd never grow fully into adulthood. But of course, there is an aspect of the ego self that is positive, and that is what carries. That ego self is that which takes on, if you like, the positive qualities that enable us to emerge into full, mature adulthood. It's only what we might term as the negative ego that we need to outgrow, and we need to relinquish, and we need to move beyond, transcend beyond. So it's important when we hear the word ego not to paint that term as entirely negative. There is a positive aspect of the ego that's necessary for us to survive in this life. But that ego self that has learned how to find the middle path in this world, to enjoy life without excess, to serve community, to serve oneself without being an ascetic, depriving oneself from the joy of life. That ego self that has found the middle way to live, the positive qualities by which to take on as behavior, is a necessary thing. So we say that it is like a steed which we can ride through this world, and it does not ride us, we do not carry it through this world. It's not a burden. We connect with our own inner light when we can transcend and move beyond the aspects of our cultural conditioning that are life-denying, that are authentically denying. So this pathway toward enlightenment is a kind of art of unlearning. It's a place where you begin to connect with what is authentic within you, that learning to listen to that inner voice that says, I've always done this because it was meant to make me a successful figure in the community, but I have no love or passion for it, and it's life-destroying. I am not flourishing in my inner life, and I feel totally inauthentic. It is these responses that we need to move beyond, to relinquish, to say, I'm sorry, I just can't do this anymore. This is living a false, hypocritical life. And we begin to slowly unlearn a lot of the imposed structures and layers on our life. And the more we shed, it's a kind of surrender. The more we let go of what is not authentic, the more there is of our ruh, our spirit, our inner light that can manifest. This dynamic between the self and the soul is the actual spiritual journey. And why it seems to be imperative that we continue our exploration outwardly. We seek our spiritual leaders. We go off into the Atlas Mountains and we head to the deserts of Morocco and India and elsewhere, is because people of light stand before us as a mirror, and we can see our best selves, we can see our own light through looking at other enlightened beings. So, and when we see that, it draws out of ourselves who we are. So enlightened beings are like mirrors to us, and they reflect back to us what it's possible to become within ourselves. So one should be not only grateful for our teachers, but we need our teachers. We need our teachers. And the teachers are there to allow our own inner guidance, our own inner light to manifest. And eventually, as we become more fully conscious of the way that we wish to lead our lives, to feel connected to the whole human family, because we are inseparable, and it's impossible not to be inseparable one from the other. The more that this awareness becomes part of our daily habit, we begin to unlearn what has veiled us from this, and And this becomes more and more our natural responsive nature. And this is what we refer to as our fitra. That word of our primordial human nature, our essence with which we were born, that has been occluded by years of conditioning, now begins to emerge again. And we are, the fitra is whole and complete. We are in that completion always, and it has only been our inability to see and to be and to be cognizant and to recognize and realize our own inner wholeness that has prevented us from living as whole, enlightened beings. So we are able to cultivate an inner authority in which Allah guides, the Al-Rashid, the guidance. We begin to draw out of ourselves, just as we begin to allow all of the Asma al-Husna, the divine attributes within us, to come forward and be the patterning, be the way we choose to behave, to transact with collaboration, cooperation, with the qualities of love, generosity, kindness, and so on. We begin to taste, to have the dhauk, to have the direct experience of all of the verses in the Quran and all of the sayings, the traditions of the Prophet. When Allah Ta'ala says that my rahmah encompasses everything, we begin to discover we live in a merciful universe, and we see it. By exuding the compassion, we experience the rahmah that comes back to us. And it is not a transaction, it is because we are inseparable from the other. There is ultimately no other. So what we bring out there will necessarily be part of our experience. And this is the root of the golden rule in Christianity: do unto others as you would do unto yourself, and love thy neighbor as thyself, because it is oneself that we are ultimately giving love toward, since there is no separation between the other and who we are. And this is also the root of the concept of karma in the East. So we can see how this unitive universe, and we in it, is based on that oneness, is based on the fact that we are all connected, and each of our soul is connected to the divine light of God. And we are already in that state of illumination. And we have a choice at every moment to act as though we are enlightened, even if we may not fully feel it yet. For our blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when reading the Quran, weep false tears, and one day genuine tears will flow. And it's unlocking the barak of the universe. It's unlocking the heart. It's unlocking the soul from the prison of conditioning. And if we can act as though we are enlightened beings, then we become that. It's a cosmic law, and none of us is free from that law. And one might ask, well, how do we live optimally in the light? And we are given such a beautiful cosmology with the divine names, with all of the qualities, the higher attributes and the positive attributes of God. 99 become part of our religious recitation, but there is no end to the number of divine qualities because God is boundless. There is no limit to how we can look upon the divine Godhead. So we act, we choose cooperation, collaboration over selfishness and self-concern, and your life will change. And we choose generosity over being mean-spirited, and our life will change. And there is no end, because at every moment life is challenging you, offering you a matter of choice. And we can choose to live that consciously or unconsciously. And when we choose the way of consciousness, you already connect with the light. Because consciousness, Ruh, life, spirit are one. Are one. It's one and the same. When we are consciousness and awake, we're in that timeless now. We're in the present moment. And we're in the baraka. And we can bring that back into our everyday life and continue to transact and to live among each other with that choice of love and unconditionality and justice, fair play. What I want for myself, I give to you, and I've already given it to myself. So this life of optimal living, of living in sacred space and sacred light, is yearning to escape from us, to radiate from who we are. And we can say yes, and we can open up to it. And if we allow ourselves to reflect deeply on the way we feel and what we think at the moment and what's in front of us, what life confronts us with at every moment, and if we are awake to that, then we step into that sacred place and we respond with our authentic soul. One has to do it to be in it. It's as simple as that, because we're already in it, but we live in this universe called the Mulk, the world of form, time and space, and it's a world of action, and we can only know through the doing. We can only know through the doing. And one of the wonderful prophetic traditions says that you will have the answer, your iman, your faith will be increased in your doing of it. It builds, it enhances, and we become fully who we were designed to be. And it's all in the DNA, it's all in the soul, it's already within the heart, it's within us. So while we maybe reflect on that for a moment, I'd like to do an exercise. You all have paper and pencil. If you would please use your sheet of paper horizontally and trace a timeline of your life right across the horizon, starting from the earliest incident that you wish to mark on your paper up to the present day, and highlight those significant incidents or points in your life. You might call it turning points where your life changed dramatically. It may be a time where there was a sudden awakening into deeper awareness. But if you could take a few minutes to do that. All right, and when you've concluded your timeline, mapping your journey, would you break up into groups of 2, share it with someone? It would be good to do it with someone that perhaps you don't know as well, or certainly not a husband and wife, and each take a turn sharing your timeline with the other person. You can perhaps just choose someone to your right or to your left, and take a few minutes doing that, please.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, you know, this we're talking about a full lifetime of each one of us, and this dialogue your conversation can continue later as well, because it's very, very important, the articulation of your awareness of what you've written on your journey. But for time, the program time requirements, if we can gather back in the circle for a moment, and I would like to, would any of you care to share any insights or your experience with this exercise? Yes? Was it useful? What did you learn from it about oneself? Anyone, please? Yes? Could you stand so the others can benefit?
Yeah, sure. It's just, I was thinking maybe too, in a certain way, so maybe like only, maybe like intellectual knowledge or something like this. So I didn't think about, general kind of more life knowledge. So yeah, just opening up a little.
Oh, it opened up that you have other dimensions besides your intellect.
Of course, yeah.
Wonderful. That's tremendous. Because you see, we're conditioned in this society, ever since really World War II, that the whole impetus of the IQ and the intellectual cognitive approach is so important, and it forgets that we're full human beings. So that's very useful for you, I'm sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else, please? Yes? Sadhaka.
I'll share about it. Because I think what for me it was realising that I think it was just through a very, very traumatic childhood that I was always looking for my identity, travelling, looking outside myself, and how it was escaping really by looking outwardly. And as you say, during that time, the 60s, everybody was, this, that, and the other. Everything was very, very outward. But inside myself, and I know I was so desperate. I was saying to Linda that when I was about 6, I can remember seeing my grandmother going to the loo to have a secret cigarette. And I thought, I do not want to end up like that. Granny has money and she's unhappy. So I think from that age, I thought, I do not want to die like this. So I travelled. And then I thought that travelling was an escape. Probably I realise now, being successful in everything, and then realising through having a big depression that I just needed to find something within myself, really. And then I met you, and the rest is history and shape of Lala, and it's just been really magnificent. So it's like a transformation inwardly more than outwardly, perhaps, but just that knowledge and the gratitude that I feel for those early years. Because if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for me thinking, I do not want this, and not conforming, and saying, I do not want to be confirmed, because I don't believe in God, and so I stood my ground very strongly. So that was it.
Yes, thank you very much. Sadhaka's point about that need to then escape and travel and search outwardly seems to be almost a requirement of the inner quest as well. So it's lovely that by doing it, you discovered that you would not find it anywhere out there, but if it's in yourself. Thank you. Thank you very much. One last sharing, please, if we could. All right, I think that was, thank you very much. That was tremendous, wonderful. What you can actually keep your journey map and add to it as time goes on. And what we can learn from that, what I learned from doing this, was the fulfillment of the prophetic hadith when Rasulullah said that you were prepared for that which you were created. Because we often think, oh, what a waste of time, or why did I have to go off into the Himalayas, or whatever it is we did. Then we recognize the pattern and how there's almost a sense of having been guided, isn't there? Because we're always being guided by the call of the soul to our true self. Thank you. I think if we could please take just a 5-minute stretch break and then return, and then we'll carry on until the 8 o'clock time slot with the second talk, and then we'll have our full break after that.
So 5
Thank you.
minutes, inshallah.